Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to return to the subject of ZimaOS, or ZimaOS, as I believe half the comments corrected me on my previous video. I'm sorry, I'm an old dog and I don't learn, so I apologise when I call it ZimaOS throughout the course of this video. But ZimaOS, I made a video about this where I was talking about, frankly, it's one of the best beginner NAS operating systems I've ever used, and given it was free, more on that later, I really did think those of you that are considering TrueNAS, considering Unraid and more, should really give it the time of day. Now, they have just rolled out their 1.5 update. This video is kind of going to be split down the middle. The first half of the video is going to be me discussing what exactly the 1.5 update brings to the party, alongside overviewing the mobile application, something I didn't include in the other video, as well as talking about the tweaks and definitely the improvements that have gone into the backup operation tool, because I'll be honest, it's really, really nice, and it actually brings a couple of new things to the fold that I've not seen other brands do before in the way they've approached the 321 backup. But alongside that, we are, of course, over the second half of this video, going to talk about the new update with regards to a paid license. Now, I know this is going to be remarkably unpopular, and we're going to dissect what exactly it means, what's good, what's bad, and ultimately by the end of it, decide whether this is justified, a good thing or a bad thing, but we can skip to that. If you already know about ZimaOS and you only want that, go to the time bar on the bottom of the screen. It's all chaptered, and you can go straight to that half where we're going to talk about the paid license. But apart from that, let's crack on and discuss the 1.5 update. So the first thing we need to discuss is that the 1.5 update doesn't actually have a lot of meat on the bone. It does have a bunch of background fixes, and the main thing for me, at least in terms of a service user perspective, is of course that backup application, but a lot of it is about drawing that line with that paid plus version that we'll talk about later on. Again, if you already use the beta, most of the things we're going to talk about were featured on that. In fact, some of these are things that I featured in the previous video while it was in beta, but have now been sort of polished and improved upon in a number of different areas there. But again, compared with other updates there, the actual amount of things included with this update aren't actually vast. And the big one is, of course, to do with the backup apparatus. So for example, this is the new backup tool there. It's worth highlighting again, if you are running the client application locally, and we'll talk about the mobile one later on, that indeed has also seen integration with the backup ops there, of how you can manage the operations on your local client device. You would select your local client, you would select the folder on the system. So for example, that one there, you click confirm, and you can start it and then schedule it whenever you need it for a live sync or a backup. But at least on the side of the application itself, the way it's been integrated is one, very user-friendly, two, surprisingly feature-rich. There is still no snapshots, by the way, something I should have included in the previous video. I still don't quite understand why there aren't any snapshots supported yet on ZimaOS. I don't know if it's a file system thing. I don't know if it's not a priority to them. I know they have gone ahead and factored a lot more of the storage stuff. They've really improved how creating storage areas works on the system and more. Along with that, obviously, native file folder explorer, but no snapshots. But when it comes to backups, remember, backup, snapshots, and RAID are very different architectures and principles. Backup ops are very straightforward. So for example, I've already synchronized the cloud space here. When you do synchronize the cloud space, you can select yourself an area of storage on the cloud. And then from there, if you choose, and this is what's really important for me, that yes, you can synchronize with somewhere on your NAS, but moreover, you can now roll in that 321 organically into the one setup. What that means is you can add another tier. So rather than backup ops between target A and target B, you can now integrate a third one. So say I want to synchronize from my cloud space, I can synchronize that onto the NAS, but then also synchronize it onto something on the LAN. So for example, this is a NAS here I've got here on the LAN that has SMB support. And as you can see now, I've created a multi-path backup op. This is no longer an AB, it's an ABC. So, or an ABB, if you will. So as you can see, nice stuff there. You can retain file versions, which is a bit, is in the realm of snapshots. I will say it's not the same, and it's only 5 historical versions, so it's more versioning than it is snapshots. But at the very least, we have got this ease of being able to create a multi-path backup ops in case one of those paths fails, or that you want to have two very distinct target ops. Now, they have still yet to factor in more cloud services. You've got your Google Drive, your Dropbox, and your OneDrive, and I will, again, depending on your point of view and where in the world you're watching this, at the very least, they've gone ahead with the, I would argue, 3 of the main cloud players here in the West, and they've not added a bunch of Eastern ones that we've not heard of here in the West, but still, they could stand to maybe add a few more there for their storage locker, particularly archival stuff like your Backblaze and stuff like that. With the LAN storage, that was really straightforward, although from what I could see, it only really utilised SMB. And of course, Zima storage, you've got your localised area where you can actually create a backup if you really want to, which is a bit baffling. You can back up 2 folders or 2 storage areas within the same Zima or ZimaOS system, all backing up back and forth. Again, not hugely reliable in terms of, failover, but still nonetheless, it's nice to have that. I really like this backup op, I will say. It lacks a few bells and whistles. Again, we talked about this before in previous videos. The lack of write once, read many there, the lack of snapshots as well, and lack of encrypted storage areas there. Now, I'm saying encrypted storage areas within this because you can, of course, go into the folder area and create your safe storage. Your safe storage there, factors in some of those encrypted storage areas, and you can go ahead and create brand new storage within that. And the safe storage, we've talked about that in the other video before, it's quite useful to have. And again, on the bottom left, you can bolt on those other storage spaces if you choose to easily, just within the file folder manager. You don't need to use just a backup op to do it. So it is user-friendly, it is intuitive as all hell. And of course, if you want to use the client app, likewise, it's pretty straightforward. Again, we talked about in the previous video the fact that now you can factor in Thunderbolt if you've got a system with one of the compatible driver-ready Thunderbolt connections on your hardware. And of course, you can factor in which areas of storage on the ZimaOS NAS you're synchronizing with your local client as well, be it your safe storage, be it your backup or other. So you've got that option to create that straightforward one-click access to those storage areas for both or either. There's not been much change to something like peer drop, which again allows you to see that network of supported and peer-to-peer connected devices to transfer files back and forth. So although I still like that, there's not been a vast improvement from what I can see in version 1.5, so I'm not going to cover that too much here. Next up, let's discuss that mobile application. Let's get that loaded up there on screen. Currently only available for Android. There's no iOS version at the moment, although it is apparently in development. The level of control you have via this app, I will say, and I should have covered it in the previous video, but I really wanted to focus on the desktop experience. It's very responsive, I will say that much. The amount of control you have is limited. I don't know how much of the control of the NAS is going to be extended onto the application. You've got resource monitor in there. With the storage monitor, you can't create areas of storage. This first page here is really just a visual. You can't do much more than that. Next up in applications and services, I will say, these do load in to them. So for example, the files application there, we're able to see our areas of storage on the system. We can go in and add those cloud and third-party services from there. Again, we can access our safe storage if we're logged in appropriately. And from that files application, we can also kind of move files in between. If we go into one of these apps and services like this one, press and hold, we've got contextual options. This is really just a modified desktop, I will say, but at the very least, we've got some of those standard options that we'd like to see, whether it is sharing a file on the fly, nice and easily there, or if we want to copy, paste, migrate, move around, those options are there. So it's responsive, it does the job, and it finds a nice line there, I would argue, between usability and presentation. But after that, we're using the third-party apps. They kind of reveal that these are really just web tunnels. So for example, Plex here, I've not set up Plex Media Server on this particular NAS that I'm using to show off Zima here. And as you can see, it's loading in with Plex, but it really is just a wrapper for a web browser for that first time setup of Plex. So again, how many of these things will translate to their own apps and services, I'm not sure, because I can't see the backup operation, for example. That's not been ported over to the mobile app. But these third-party ones do seemingly connect in a way that they are borderline usable. Now, the backup thing, as you can see, actually runs native. Accessing that backup op from there, you can't do. So, for example, if I want to look at existing backup ops, I can't do that. I can only set up brand new ones. So, for example, if I want to back up from this device and I select an area of storage, so for example, my cameras folder there, from there on the Zima, I then have to select the destination. So I would select perhaps the safe storage there. And you may have noticed actually there at the bottom, there is still some localization changes still needing to be made there, like at the bottom of the screen. We've got Chinese characters instead of English. But apart from that, you've got remote check to make sure everything is working. So when you're selecting all of that, just to double check that these pathways are legit. And if they are confirmed to be fine, from there, you can go ahead and go into starting the backup operation. Again, you can run it in the background without the app closing it if you choose to. Again, fairly standard stuff. I'm not going to say this is going to break the internet, this mobile app. It simply won't. It's quite basic. But at the very least, we've got our maintenance. It can relay from the remote access relay services included with ZimaOS. And we can access those third-party apps as well as file folder management. For some users, this is going to be enough. Perhaps multimedia apps would have been nice to see on here. And some of the third-party apps that they've got for, say, AI photo recognition that you can use this towards, they would have been nice to have. And searching, like the file and folder search there, we can vaguely search around the NAS. So for example, creating folders we can do. And if we go into the side options of that file folder manager there and go into it there, we've got options, but still it's arguably just the desktop experience extended over and not a true full mobile experience there. Not bad, but still pretty good. But still a little bit of work to be done. Now let's head back and discuss, of course, the new ZimaCube pricing. So let's talk about it. Let's be honest, ZimaOS, as good as it is, a lot of users are going to debate whether it justifies this price tag. Now, I'm going to get it out of the way early doors. I think it does. I really, really do think it does. I think $29 isn't much. And I am going to go through both pros and cons of this approach, but I wanted complete transparency here. I'm on board with this for the reasons that I'll explain later on. But referring back to my previous video, this, for me, this change doesn't, you know, I don't think changes my perspective with regards to how I felt in that previous video about what ZimaOS or ZimaOS is, and more importantly, whether I think it can still stand against large-scale operating systems that have been around for 1 or 2 decades at this point. And now the free version, I'm going to go through the things right now that I think are really important to note. By the way, Zima has absolutely no, or ISRAEL have no input on this video. Again, all the information I've got here is from public available sources. And although I do have a contact at that brand that I've contacted before with regards to reviewing their devices, I think it's really important to note they've got no control over this. They're not seeing this video. And more importantly, they've got no influence over this. I get no commission. I get nothing. So right now, this is about my own opinion, and everything I'm going to say right now has got no control by a third party. So why am I on board with this? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, you can still use Zima's free version forever for free, right? The free version you can still use. It's not going anywhere. You can still use. It's not a trial system. It is access it. The fact it only supports up to 4 disks and 3 users. 3 users, I think that's fine. 4 disks seems needlessly tight. I would have made it 5 perhaps. I understand they've got to find a trade-off point between users that are going to play with it and users that will just live on the free tier forever. But still, nonetheless, 4 seems a little tight overall. Now, the real change just comes down to those 2 factors at the end. The actual feature set beyond that doesn't change whatsoever. Whether you're using the paid version or the free version, and again, remember that 29 isn't, you know, per month or per year, that's total. 29 forever. But you don't lose out on any of the features. It's just the extent to the storage and the number of users you can create with access to it. Now, to their credit, they have created quite a detailed FAQ where I have seen lots of brands who have rolled out this kind of, we're going to use the word tactic, to be very restrictive on the actual queues that they're being FA'd. They have addressed pretty much for me all of the big questions. So what is the main difference? When they talk about will it ever become a subscription afterwards? It will never be a subscription. That's not in their planned model. With regards to the validity of this paid membership, how long it actually lasts, what is lifetime? Again, in these days with grandfathering as well, that is a real question. But the biggest thing for me, which makes me feel okay about this change, is right at the bottom. Right now, if you have got ZimaOS, you can just get the paid version forever for free anyway. So until June of 2026, if you've got ZimaOS, congratulations, when you update to 1.5, you've got the paid lifetime. If you get ZimaOS now, or ZimaOS on the 29th of June 2026, which again at the time of recording, we're recording this midway through October 2025, so it's 3/4 of a year away. You are going to be able to upgrade to it all the time. So to me, it's an enormous amount of notice they're giving users for such a comparatively small amount of money that will, of course, go to devs. Now, if you have purchased or in the future purchase an Icewhale Zima device, Zima Cube, if there's a Zima Cube 2 or that Zima board 2, obviously that will include that paid license as well, which they detail in their descriptions. That said, it's worth remembering this is a per device license. So whether that is you've currently got a ZimaOS device or you've got a ZimaOS installed NAS device and you're going to upgrade it to the free version by literally just upgrading to 1.5, it's automatic. You don't have to send an email or anything. Or it's after the June 2026 deadline and you've purchased a license, it's just for that system. Now, you can use their license transfer system to allow you to carry it over to the new device, or you could just do yourself a favor and do 2 or 3 different installs. I'm just saying now before the deadline kicks in. But again, that $29 forever license is per device. But I also want to drill into that number. Now, that number $29, it would be very easy to say, oh, it includes remote access services, but realistically, not everyone's going to use a remote access service, and some of you are going to be using Tailstale and other stuff like that. You might just be keeping the whole thing local. That money will go towards client applications, but you could argue, I'm not going to use the mobile app. I didn't plan to use a desktop experience. I was going to do the whole thing on Samba, and that's perfectly fine. But ultimately, software development for security patches, for fixes, takes time, takes energy. And $29, when we've talked about recent instances of software development and how much they are either charging or planning to charge, I think $29 ain't too shabby for an entire NAS OS, when something like Hex OS is kind of a wrapper for TrueNAS. And let's look at another great example from this year, Plex. Plex upgraded their lifetime subscription to $249. And remember, that's not an entire operating system. That is just the app. An app, by the way, you can just install. And of course, having a Plex Pass gives you extra benefits like hardware transcoding and stuff like that. Or you could use Jellyfin and get it for free. But that's my point. $29 for me is fine. I think for what you're getting, and to give for users who have been given close to a year, because I think this was rolled out in September, call it 10 months of opportunity to get a free lifetime license. I can't really argue with this. I just can't. No, I really do welcome discussion of this in the comments, because, I know there's going to be users that are going to disagree with me on this. And you're right. You could go use TrueNAS for free. You're absolutely right. You could use Open Media Vault for free. You could do that. You could use Unraid and, get a 30-day license on that. Or, how much is Unraid these days? Unraid up their prices, lifetime that is $249. Now again, Unraid is a completely different conversation to that of Plex or Hex I just mentioned. That is the full OS. That's all of the software updates forever. That, to me, is a compelling price point for what you are getting there. It's quite a lot, and we can talk about that in another video. But again, this is a whole OS that's still developing, sure, and it's, feature light compared to that of Unraid in the grand scheme of things, but it's $29. I would really welcome a good conscious argument why $29 for a lifetime license for something that's been running. Casa OS was released in, I think it was December 2021, and Zima was the kind of upscaled version of that for more powerful processor-rich architectures. I just don't think it's a compelling argument against going for this. I do think this price increase is, the introduction of this price is, well, justified. Is ZimaOS perfect? God, no, it really isn't. I mean, for example, the desktop client is light. I do think they could stand to have a few of their own apps and services there. And likewise, the mobile client there, as we've already touched on, there's still no iOS one there. And the Android app is there, but it's a little feature light as well. It's not a perfect platform right now, but it's already been used by quite a lot of people. They've given users all these months to get hold of it for free. No, I can't criticise this. Apologies for the repetition towards the end of this video. It's just in the last few weeks I have had emails from different users and DMs effectively saying, don't you think this is appalling? And I just don't think it's appalling, but I look forward to talking about it more because we did a video very recently in the Raid Room series where we compared ZimaOS with HexOS in terms of developer and target audience, because they are, I would argue, aiming very similar audience members right now that are going DIY that maybe aren't looking for such a tech-heavy user experience. And, you know, their audiences are going to cross over more than you might think. But let me know what you guys think. But this has been the ZimaOS Update 1.5. Are you an existing user? Has this tempted you over the fold from something like a larger scale TrueNAS or Unraid deployment? Do let me know. Now, in a few weeks, I am going to be heading over to Shenzhen, China once again. I'm visiting a few of the brands that I've talked about on the channel. I didn't get a chance to visit in my previous visit to find out what's going on with them. And I am seriously considering taking a little visit, because although ZimaOS isn't based in Shenzhen, China, I do believe they do have an office there, or at least somewhere in Hong Kong, so hopefully I can drop in there. Let me know what you guys think, if I should go ahead with that. I generally don't like to give brands too much notice that I'm going to do this, and I have started talking to a few different ones. I might have to bring this up in conversation, but do let me know. But I look forward to hearing from you guys in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.